Raising my son Jackson alone after his mother walked out when he was just 3 years old was the hardest and most rewarding job of my life. For 20 years, I worked my fingers to the bone as a mechanic to give him opportunities I never had. Watching him graduate college, build a career, and fall in love filled me with more pride than I can express. But at his wedding to Amanda Richardson from one of the wealthiest families in Connecticut, I discovered my assigned seat had a nameplate reading low-educated fake dad, while everyone else had proper titles. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you believe family is about love, not status. I came to America from Mexico when I was just 8 years old. My parents were farm workers who crossed the border seeking a better life for our family. We settled in Arizona, where I learned English quickly and worked alongside my father whenever school was out. Those early years taught me the value of hard work and persistence, lessons that would shape my entire life. By 20, I had become a United States citizen and was working as an apprentice mechanic at a local garage. I had a natural talent for understanding engines, could diagnose problems by sound alone, and took pride in fixing things others had given up on. My dream was to own my own shop someday, though I had barely finished high school and had no formal training beyond that. I met Elaine at the garage when she brought in her struggling Honda Civic. She was beautiful, educated, and seemingly out of my league, but we connected instantly over my genuine interest in explaining the repairs her car needed. When I offered to show her how to perform basic maintenance herself, she surprised me by accepting. Those impromptu lessons turned into coffee dates, which evolved into a whirlwind romance. We married after just 6 months, young and optimistic, despite the concerns from her college-educated family about her choice in partner. When Jackson was born a year later, I felt my life had found its purpose. I would stare at his tiny face for hours, promising him silently that I would give him everything I never had. For the first 3 years, we were a family. Not wealthy, not without struggles, but together. I worked long hours at the garage, advancing to a full mechanic position, while Elaine took part-time jobs between caring for Jackson. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment, saved what we could, and dreamed of something better. The cracks began showing when Elaine started comparing our life to her college friends who had married doctors, lawyers, and businessmen. Weekend brunches with them would leave her quiet and distant. She began making comments about our apartment size, my work clothes that always smelled of motor oil, no matter how many times they were washed, and the vacations we could not afford to take. "I thought you would have your own garage by now," she said one night after another silent dinner. "I thought things would be different." 6 months later, I came home from work to find Jackson alone in front of the television and a note on the kitchen table. "I cannot do this anymore. I deserve more than this life. Jackson will be better off without me constantly resenting what could have been." No explanation to our 3-year-old son. No goodbye. Just abandoned by the person who was supposed to love him unconditionally. The divorce papers arrived by mail 2 weeks later, along with a document relinquishing all parental rights. She had moved to Chicago with a pharmaceutical executive she had reconnected with at a college reunion. They married within a year, and despite my efforts to keep some connection for Jackson's sake, she made it clear that her new life had no room for reminders of her past. The first year alone with Jackson nearly broke me. I would work at the garage from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., rush to pick him up from the neighbor who watched him make a simple dinner, bathe him, read to him, and put him to bed. Then I would take on additional night work cleaning offices until midnight before starting the cycle again the next day. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. What kept me going was Jackson's smile each morning, his curiosity about everything, and his resilience despite the absence of his mother. He never stopped asking where she was those first few months, and each time I had to gently explain that Mommy lived far away now. Something inside me shattered a little more. As Jackson entered elementary school, I rearranged my schedule to be more present. I convinced my boss to let me work earlier shifts so I could pick Jackson up from school most days. I joined the PTA as the only father among mostly mothers, enduring their initial suspicion that soon turned to respect when they saw my commitment. I learned to cook properly, sew buttons, treat fevers, and braid hair for crazy hair day. All skills I had never imagined needing. School conferences were intimidating as teachers would sometimes speak to me slowly, assuming my limited education and accent meant I could not understand their assessments of Jackson. But I always showed up, asked intelligent questions, and advocated fiercely for my son. When one teacher suggested Jackson might need remedial reading because home support might be lacking, I instituted nightly reading sessions and personally visited the public library each week for new books. 3 months later, Jackson had jumped 2 reading levels. My own dreams of education and business ownership took a back seat to Jackson's needs. When offered a management position at the garage that would require night classes in business administration, I declined because it would mean less time with my son. When an opportunity to buy into a failing garage arose, I could not take the financial risk as a single parent with no safety net. My priority was stability for Jackson, not personal ambition. Despite my limited resources, Jackson thrived. He inherited my mechanical aptitude, but combined it with an academic drive that amazed me. By middle school, he was taking advanced classes and talking about college, something no one in my family had ever attended. I started a small college fund, putting away $20 a week, even when it meant skipping meals myself. I will never forget the afternoon Jackson came home from his sophomore year of high school with information about a prestigious engineering scholarship. "Dad," he said with unusual seriousness, "I need to maintain a 4.0 GPA for this. Will you help me?" For the next 2 years, I became his study partner, despite not understanding much of the advanced material. I would read his textbooks after he went to sleep, searching terms online, watching educational videos, doing whatever it took to help him achieve his goals. We converted our small dining table into a permanent study area with notes, flashcards, and projects constantly spread across it. The day the scholarship letter arrived, Jackson insisted I be the one to open it. When I read the words "pleased to inform you," we both broke down crying. My son would attend one of the top engineering programs in the country, an opportunity that seemed impossible for a kid raised by a mechanic in a 2-bedroom apartment. College changed Jackson in ways I had not anticipated. He joined clubs, made connections, and was introduced to a world of privilege I had never known existed. During his junior year, he switched his major from engineering to business after an internship opened doors to corporate America. I supported his decision, even while privately mourning the loss of our shared mechanical interests. It was during his final year of business school that he met Amanda Richardson. Their romance progressed quickly, and soon Jackson was spending holidays with her family rather than coming home. I understood. The Richardson family estate was surely more impressive than our modest home, and they could offer connections and experiences I never could. The first time I met the Richardsons at an upscale restaurant, the divide was immediately apparent. William Richardson, a third-generation investment banker, asked where I had attended college. When I explained I had not had that opportunity, the subtle shift in his demeanor told me everything. His wife Margaret discussed their summer home in the Hamptons and winter skiing in Aspen, while I had nothing comparable to contribute to the conversation. Amanda was polite but distant, her smile never quite reaching her eyes when she looked at me. Only Jackson seemed oblivious to the undercurrent, proudly telling stories of my sacrifices and lessons in an attempt to bridge worlds that seemed incompatible. As their relationship became more serious, my interactions with the Richardsons became increasingly uncomfortable. There were comments about Jackson's remarkable rise from his humble beginnings as though he had emerged from some kind of deficit. Questions about his mother were met with thinly veiled relief when they learned she came from an educated background, as if that explained his success despite my influence. When Jackson called to announce their engagement after just 1 year of dating, I expressed genuine happiness, while privately worrying about what integration into the Richardson family would mean for our relationship. "Nothing will change between us, Dad," he promised. "Amanda loves me, and that includes loving my family too." I wanted desperately to believe him. The Grand Windsor Hotel was exactly the kind of venue I would have expected the Richardsons to choose for their daughter's wedding. Crystal chandeliers hung from ornate ceilings. Marble floors gleamed under my newly purchased dress shoes, and staff, in formal uniforms, circulated with trays of champagne and appetizers I could not pronounce. The total cost of this wedding could have bought every house on the block where Jackson and I had lived. I arrived early, dressed in a new charcoal suit I had saved for 6 months to purchase. The tailor had assured me it was appropriate for such an occasion, though standing among the arriving guests in designer wear made me feel underdressed nonetheless. I hovered near the entrance, smiling at people who largely looked through me rather than at me. "You must be Jackson's father." A woman in an elaborate hat finally approached me. "Margaret has told me all about you. So interesting that you work with your hands." Her tone suggested she was discussing an exotic specimen rather than a person. "Yes, I am a mechanic," I replied with the dignity Jackson had always taught me to maintain. "It has provided for us well over the years." How quaint, she responded before being pulled away by another guest. Throughout the rehearsal dinner the previous evening I had noticed similar reactions. Conversations would stop when I approached, only to resume with forced smiles and simplified topics. William Richardson introduced me to his colleagues as Jackson's father without using my name, while everyone else received proper introductions with professional titles. The morning of the wedding I joined Jackson in the groom's suite, bringing him the watch that had belonged to my father. It was not valuable in monetary terms, but carried generations of meaning. "Your grandfather wore this, working the fields of Mexico," I told him as I fastened it around his wrist. "It represents how far our family has come in just 2 generations." Jackson hugged me fiercely. "I would not be standing here without you, Dad." For that moment, all was right in my world. My son was happy, successful, and acknowledged the foundation I had worked so hard to provide. I felt a surge of pride watching him prepare to begin this new chapter, even if I had reservations about the family he was marrying into. The ceremony itself was beautiful, if extravagant. Jackson looked handsome and confident, standing at the altar. Amanda was stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than my car. I sat in the front row as father of the groom, though notably separated from the Richardson family by several strategically placed relatives. It was during the reception that everything unraveled. I found my assigned seat at a table far from the wedding party, despite Jackson's earlier insistence that I would be seated with him. The table appeared to be a collection of outliers: a distant cousin with a drinking problem, an elderly aunt who kept falling asleep, and a few of Amanda's co-workers who seemed confused by their placement. Then I saw the nameplate. While everyone else had tasteful calligraphy displaying Mr. William Richardson, or Dr. Elizabeth Taylor, mine read in the same elegant script, "Low-educated fake dad." At first I thought it must be a terrible mistake, perhaps a cruel joke by a staff member, or a mix-up with placeholder text. But as I looked up, I caught the eye of Margaret Richardson, who quickly looked away with what could only be described as a smirk. Nearby, several of Amanda's cousins were whispering and glancing in my direction, phones discreetly positioned to capture my reaction. "They put him at table 19, I overheard one of Amanda's uncles say to another guest. William insisted, "Cannot have him telling those blue-collar stories during the main dinner." My hand shook as I reached for a water glass. 20 years of sacrifices of working until my back ached and my hands cracked of helping with homework. I barely understood myself of attending every school function and sports game, no matter how exhausted I was, reduced to low-educated fake dad. I considered leaving immediately. The humiliation burned through me like acid, made worse by the realization that this was no accident but a deliberate attempt to put me in my place. Yet leaving would create a scene, would hurt Jackson on what should be the happiest day of his life. So I sat, maintaining the dignity I had always tried to model for my son. During the dinner I heard snippets of conversation that cut deeper than any physical wound. We tried to convince Amanda to exclude him, but Jackson insisted. Margaret Richardson told a friend at a neighboring table, not bothering to lower her voice. "You know these charity cases always clinging to their roots. But the reception will be over in a few hours, and then we can properly welcome Jackson to the family." I forced myself to eat small bites of the gourmet meal, though each swallow felt like pushing past a stone in my throat. When William Richardson rose to give his father of the bride speech, my entire body tensed. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Amanda and Jackson," he began smoothly. "We are particularly grateful that Jackson was able to overcome his unfortunate beginnings and prove himself worthy of joining our family. It just goes to show that with the right guidance and influences, anyone can rise above their circumstances." The casual cruelty of his words hung in the air, while guests nodded approvingly. In a room full of people, I had never felt more alone or invisible. 2 decades of parenting, of loving my son with everything I had dismissed as unfortunate beginnings to be overcome. Jackson found me shortly afterward, his face flushed with happiness that quickly faded when he saw my expression. "Dad, what is wrong? You have barely touched your food." I did not want to ruin his day. "It is nothing, son. Just feeling a little out of place." "No, something happened." He insisted, pulling up a chair beside me, rather than returning to the head table where his bride waited. "Tell me." With reluctance, I turned over my nameplate. Jackson stared at it for several long seconds, his expression morphing from confusion to disbelief to cold fury. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "It does not matter. I tried to smooth things over. Let us just enjoy your day." But Jackson was already scanning the room, his jaw clenched in a way I recognized from his childhood whenever he felt injustice brewing. His eyes locked on his new mother-in-law, who was watching our interaction with poorly concealed disdain. "It matters to me," he said, standing suddenly. "It matters very much." Jackson strode directly to the head table, nameplate in hand, my protests dying in my throat as I hurried after him. The music continued playing, but a hush fell over the nearby tables as guests sensed drama unfolding. "Would someone like to explain this?" Jackson asked, his voice controlled, but carrying across the space as he placed the nameplate in front of William and Margaret Richardson. Amanda looked confused. "What is that? This," Jackson said, "is what your family thinks of my father. The man who raised me alone after my mother abandoned us. The man who worked 18-hour days so I could have opportunities he never had." Margaret Richardson's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Jackson, dear, this is hardly the time or place for what," Jackson interrupted, "for addressing the fact that you deliberately humiliated the most important person in my life. The person without whom I would never have met your daughter, attended college, or become the man Amanda fell in love with." Guests were openly staring now. William Richardson stood, attempting to take control of the situation. "Son, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "I am not your son," Jackson said firmly. "And no, we will not hide this away. I want to know who thought this was acceptable. And I want to know now." Amanda picked up the nameplate, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she read it. "Mom, Dad, did you do this?" Margaret sighed dramatically. "It was just a bit of humor, Jackson. Surely you can take a joke." "A joke?" Jackson's voice rose slightly. "You think publicly mocking my father is funny? The man who taught me everything I know about integrity and respect." I placed a hand on Jackson's arm, trying to defuse the situation. "Jackson, please. This is your wedding day. Do not let this ruin it." My son turned to me, his eyes shining with emotion. "No, Dad. I have watched you swallow your pride too many times for my sake. Not today. Not anymore." He turned back to the Richardsons. "For months you have been subtly undermining my father, suggesting I need to upgrade my connections for my career, making comments about his accent, his education, his job. I ignored it because I love Amanda and wanted our families to get along. But this crosses a line I cannot accept." Amanda took Jackson's hand, her face pale but determined. "Jackson is right. This is absolutely unacceptable." Her mother looked shocked at the betrayal. "Amanda, you cannot seriously be taking his side over your own family." "I am taking the side of basic human decency," Amanda replied. "And if this is how you treat family, then perhaps I need to reconsider what that word means." Jackson addressed his new bride directly. "Amanda, I love you, but I need to know where you stand right now. Either your parents publicly apologize to my father, or I cannot continue this reception." The silence that followed was deafening. 300 guests watched the standoff, champagne glasses frozen mid-air, forks suspended over half-eaten cake. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of us, years of class divisions and prejudice suddenly exposed in the elegant ballroom. William Richardson attempted damage control. "Jackson, surely you are overreacting. We have welcomed you into our family, provided a beautiful wedding. My father provided for me my entire life, with far fewer resources. Jackson cut him off. He never once made me feel like I should be grateful for his love. That is the difference between you. Amanda stepped away from her parents and stood beside Jackson. I am so sorry, Mr. Garcia, she addressed me directly for perhaps the first time. I had no idea my family had done this or had been treating you this way all along. It is unforgivable. Margaret made one last attempt to save face. This is ridiculous. It was a harmless prank. The staff must have mixed up the placeholders. The staff did not write low-educated fake dad by mistake, Jackson said coldly. And we both know it. William Richardson finally recognized the severity of the situation as guests began whispering, and several were discreetly recording the confrontation on their phones. Richardson family reputation was at stake now. Perhaps, he said carefully, there has been a regrettable misunderstanding. Octavio, I apologize if you were made to feel unwelcome. That was never our intention. It was a hollow, incomplete apology. But before I could respond, Jackson spoke again. My father taught me that a man's worth is not measured by his bank account or his degrees, but by his character and the sacrifices he makes for those he loves. By that measure, he is worth more than anyone in this room. Then he turned to me, his expression softening. Dad, let us show them what family really means. He guided me to the head table, pulling out a chair next to his own. You belong here beside me, as you have been my entire life. Amanda nodded firmly, taking the seat on Jackson's other side and squeezing his hand in solidarity. For the remainder of the reception, I sat proudly beside my son, receiving cautious but respectful interactions from guests who had previously ignored me. The Richardsons maintained their composure, but the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. My son had not only defended my honor, but had established boundaries that would shape their relationship moving forward. As we prepared to leave, William Richardson approached me privately. I underestimated your influence on Jackson, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. He is a remarkable young man. Yes, I replied simply. He is. The day after the wedding, Jackson and Amanda canceled their plans for an immediate honeymoon instead, inviting me to a private dinner at their new apartment. The conversation was initially awkward, with Amanda clearly embarrassed by her family's behavior. I should have seen what was happening, she said, serving the pasta she had prepared herself, rather than ordering in, as was their usual habit. Looking back, there were so many comments, so many moments where they were disrespectful to you, Mr. Garcia. I feel terrible that I missed it. Please call me Octavio, I said gently, and you are not responsible for your parents' actions. Jackson reached across the table to take both our hands. What matters is where we go from here. Amanda and I have talked, and we want to establish some clear boundaries with her family. Amanda nodded firmly. I have already spoken with them. I made it clear that disrespecting you means disrespecting us. They will not be part of our lives if they cannot accept and value you as Jackson's father. I was touched by their solidarity, but concerned about creating a permanent rift. Family is complicated, I said carefully. And despite everything, they are still your parents, Amanda. Yes, but that does not give them the right to treat people poorly, she replied. The values I fell in love with in Jackson, his integrity, his work ethic, his compassion, these all came from you. I want those same values in our home and in our future family. The conversation shifted to deeper waters as we discussed how different our backgrounds were and what that might mean for their marriage. I shared stories of raising Jackson that I had never told before. The desperate moments of near financial collapse, the times I had gone hungry so he could eat well, the night classes I attempted and abandoned because they took me away from home too much. Amanda listened with tears in her eyes. I had no idea, she whispered. Jackson always talked about your sacrifices, but hearing the details, I understand now why yesterday meant so much to him. Over the following months, a delicate reconciliation began. It started with small gestures. Margaret Richardson sending a handwritten apology note, William asking for my opinion on a car he was considering purchasing. These were tentative olive branches, but I accepted them graciously, believing that healing was better than division. 6 months after the wedding, we all gathered at the Richardson estate for a significant announcement. I arrived with trepidation, memories of the wedding nameplate still fresh, but was greeted with unexpected warmth by Margaret herself. "Octavio, thank you for coming," she said, showing me into their home personally rather than delegating to staff as she had in the past. "Jackson and Amanda have been very mysterious about this dinner. Do you know what they are planning to share?" Her attempt at casual conversation was stiff but sincere, and I appreciated the effort. "I am as curious as you are," I replied honestly. When Jackson and Amanda announced they were expecting a baby, the atmosphere transformed entirely. Impending grandparenthood created a new common ground between previously divided families. William Richardson found me after dinner, an expensive scotch in hand. "It seems we will be sharing a grandchild," he said, offering me a glass. I thought perhaps we might start fresh. I accepted the drink and his sentiment. "I would like that very much. I have been thinking about what Jackson said at the wedding." William continued surprising me with his candor, about measuring a man's worth by his character and sacrifices. "I admit I have spent most of my life judging people by different metrics. We all have our blind spots," I offered. He nodded thoughtfully. "My father handed me a successful business and connections to build upon. I never had to prove myself the way you did. The way you raised Jackson single-handedly, that takes a kind of strength I am not sure I possess." This acknowledgement, however belated, meant more than any apology could have. In that moment, a genuine respect began to form between us, not as father and father-in-law, but simply as two men who loved the same young couple and their unborn child. When my grandson Michael was born 10 months after the wedding, I arrived at the hospital to find the Richardsons already there. Margaret approached me with the baby in her arms. "Michael needs his grandfather, Octavio," she said carefully, transferring him to me. "Jackson says you have the magic touch with babies." Holding my grandson, I felt the full circle of life's journey. From the young immigrant boy working in Arizona fields to the proud grandfather of this child who would never know the hardships I had faced, who would have opportunities I could never have imagined for myself. As the months passed, the relationship between our families continued to evolve. William offered to invest in a small auto restoration business. I had always dreamed of starting a genuine business partnership rather than charity. Margaret began consulting me about birthday and holiday gifts for Jackson, acknowledging that I knew him best. Most touching of all was the day I visited their home and noticed a new family photo prominently displayed on the mantel. There I was included without hesitation with a small engraved plate reading "Beloved Father and Grandfather." Looking back on the wedding day incident now, I can see it was a necessary catalyst for growth on all sides. The painful moment forced Jackson to assert boundaries, compelled the Richardsons to confront their prejudices, and allowed me to finally receive the respect I had earned through years of silent sacrifice. I learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing poor behavior, but rather choosing to move forward without bitterness. I chose to forgive the Richardsons not for their sake, but for my own peace and for the future of our shared family. True family is not defined by education, wealth, or status. It is built through sacrifice, loyalty, and unconditional love. Sometimes it takes a painful moment of truth to reveal who truly stands beside you when it matters most. Have you ever had to stand up for a family member who was being disrespected, or had someone stand up for you when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of bridging family divides resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming life's challenges with dignity. Share this video with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth is not determined by their background or bank account, but by the love they give freely to others. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, real family stands together no matter what.